Time now for this week's Health Matters. Paul Critz with you, along with physician assistant Lynn Szabo. How you doing, Lynn?
I'm doing good.
You doing all right? We had summer for a little while, and then it went away, and now it's winter time again. I don't like this, but okay. I'm wearing shorts for some reason. I think in denial. That's why I'm wearing the shorts today. This is not happening, but okay. So let's talk health then, and all that matters health-wise. But this is something that's actually we've kind of been talking around this subject for a while, and a lot of other different topics. But gut health.
Gut health, yeah. I wanted to go back to that Outdoor Magazine or article that I referenced kind of in the last time we talked. Mm-hmm. So this is really focused on that right now, and this is part one of a closer look, and part two is coming. So
okay.
The article is titled "The High Performance Secrets Inside Athletes' Guts," and it was written by David Ferry, originally published 1/15/2018 and updated 6/30/21. I thought this was one of the most compelling articles I've ever read in any of the outdoor magazines that I kind of perused through.
Really?
I thought this was super interesting, kind of a little bit different than, recipes you can make over the campfire this summer.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm looking
a little more helpful, I think.
And I'm looking at this, and I'm going, so how did it tie to the outdoor magazine side of the whole thing? This is interesting to me.
Well, because there's a lot of elite athletes, I think, that they are trying to attract or already speak to, and there's a lot of obsession in the outdoor community with how you hit peak performance in your particular sport of choice.
Okay.
And there's a lot of different sports. We'll kind of get into that, but how you should manage your diet, how you should manage your training regime, when you've gone too far. There really is a lot of detail that they pay attention to.
Wow. Okay.
So they looked at a small number of elite athletes, and then they said also a few outdoor staff members. There are probably some crossover in that anyway.
Right.
It would be a cool job to have. And these athletes were involved in different types of sports and different ages, but they mostly skewed younger.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And they had different diets. They were also from different countries, but mostly the United States, also different genders. And interestingly, they had a couple that they compared people, so a man and a woman who lived together as partners, and they kind of compared what the difference was. They're also in similar sports, so what the difference was, because you get most of your microbiome from people that are around you.
Wow, yeah.
People who live with you.
Is this just, as far as methodology goes, is this like is this all over the place as far as your sample?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but they did get some interesting things. Then their findings were diverse because their study subjects are diverse.
Exactly. Yeah.
But each individual was interviewed as to their lifestyle, their sport, their diet, and their alcohol use, and probably some other factors. But those were the things that were repetitively looked at.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they did was they got stool samples from all these guys, and they sent them off. And we'll talk a little bit later about where they sent them off. But they looked at the bowel bacteria that they had. They were looking on the genus level, so not species necessarily. So that's a broad family. They were dividing it into broad families. And then they looked at relative proportion, and they tried to make some overall conclusions from that, but also just, I think, some observations based on what the person's competitive sport was.
Relative proportions of those categories, of those genus categories that they developed.
Right.
Okay.
And then they looked at the types of bacteria, then hypothesized the benefits. And so I've got a bunch of specifics about the different genus, but what struck me in this article is everybody's was different. Mm-hmm. And these are all elite athletes who are in top shape, and nobody really has a single path to health. And sometimes just their sport had an effect on what was going on in their bowels.
Okay.
For example, there was a ultra marathon runner, and it was a woman who competes a lot in tough mudder, and so she had a lot of soil bacteria.
She had a what?
A lot of soil bacteria.
Oh, okay, that makes
in
sense.
her gut because she was rolling
always
around
crawling
in it,
around
and
it,
probably
yeah.
eating it. So, I thought that was super interesting, but also I'm thinking I'm looking for the golden one. What do I do? What do I go down to the store and get this particular species, and then I'm going to be a top athlete, gut person.
Right.
It's not like that. And they find what each genus does is something really, really specific. And it's also specific to the complexity of the environment is specific to the place in the gastrointestinal tract where certain things happen.
Okay.
So small intestine is all about absorption, and there's parts of the small intestine. So you're going to find different microflora in the proximal part, that means the part that's closest to the stomach, or the distal part, that's the part that empties into the large colon, large intestine. So there is no one wonderful answer that's going to save us all.
Wow, okay.
Which is kind of a bummer, but kind of interesting.
Okay, so what'd they find?
So what's
the big deal about this study? You're basically telling me it's like they put in X number of inputs and they got that same X number of outputs. So what was the efficacy of the study then?
Well, we're cutting to the summary, but what they found was certain types of bacteria helps the immune system and are more often seen in endurance athletes, and this is associated with vegetarian diets. So they were able to make some conclusions based on that. They also found a group of bacteria that was really common that protected against leaky gut. So leaky gut syndrome, I'm not even sure that's a real thing.
I was going down. That sounds like more than I would want to handle. But I've never heard of that leaky gut syndrome.
Yeah, I think it involves the barrier between the microflora and the actual intestinal wall and how things cross over.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you want the good things to cross over, right? Because you're absorbing nutrients. And you want the bad things to stay in their own lane and then eventually get eliminated.
Okay.
They found bacteria types that were really, really helpful in breaking down fiber, especially into chemicals that support the immune system.
Wow. Okay.
So that implies the gastrointestinal tract is an important part of the immune system. So, and then they also found if people lack these certain types of bacteria, that they're more likely to have diabetes, which I thought was interesting, and Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory bowel disease.
Huh.
Yeah.
So when you say they're more likely to have diabetes, what kind?
Type 2.
Just type 2, right?
Yeah.
Because type 1, you
type 1
either have
actually,
or you don't.
they think is a pancreas hit from
Really?
the virus, but there's in a genetically susceptible individual, but there's probably more ways to get there than just that.
Wow.
And then they found a certain type of bacteria that breaks down fiber into what's called butyric acid, and that helps decrease inflammation. So these are all really specific things that you wouldn't even think would be in, we don't, I think as lay people, or even as medical professionals, I didn't understand how intricate this system is.
Right.
And then some break down starch into beneficial fatty acids, which I'll get back to in the next section.
Okay.
And then they found bacteria in there that was actually associated with disease, but the proportion of it was such that, it's always got to be there. It's got a good role, especially Clostridium. That's the famous C. difficile. For anybody who's had it, it's pretty terrible, associated with antibiotic use. It's good to have some of it in your bowels because it's associated with environmental stability of the microbiome population.
How so?
It just seems to keep everybody happy and doing their job.
Just to have that little bit of a...
Right.
That's
have
weird.
A little bit of it. But if you wipe out everything else and you have a relative increase in the population of C. diff, then you have pathology.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it's actually pretty hard to treat and miserable to go through.
I imagine, are there... what we call the good bacteria, the good gut stuff, out of balance could be the same way, right?
Right. So you're also looking at proportions of stuff.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're saying. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
So, in summary, what you want to be as healthy as you can is to have a microbiome that is diverse with lots of different kind of organisms. Okay, the correct relative proportion of the different organisms, and there's no one golden formula, is what they found. But these athletes got here mostly by being vegetarian, sometimes vegan, and they ate a lot of fiber.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you could identify that maybe as prebiotics. We talked about that before. Prebiotics being the structure that you send down for the probiotics to live on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they only consume small amounts of alcohol. So it's like, forget the beer, eat a lot of kale.
Okay.
I guess. But a really important thing is you have to stay away from antibiotics because those decrease the bowel flora diversity and it takes a while to rebound.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that I remember about the guy with the healthiest, what they decided was the healthiest flora, remember we referenced him before, he's a surfer. I think he actually lives on the North Sea somewhere. He's 100% organic. He eats 100% from his garden. He's a vegetarian. And he has a special spring on his land. Because that's one thing they didn't really look at is they looked at alcohol as a factor, but not really water.
Wow. Okay.
And I think water is kind of important. Plus, we were thinking, well, if he's a surfer, he's probably swallowing salt water. And does that make a difference? I bet it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So super interesting article. And of course, it's kind of interesting to see all these young, healthy athletes and what their lifestyles are. So they had one guy living out of a van. Most people had housing. Most people were in the United States. And then one couple who had similar bowel flora.
Okay, so I don't understand then.
What? What's the point?
What's the point? What's the point of this study? What's the point of bringing it up? What did they learn? What's the outcome? I mean,
so what they learned is that if you want to maximize the health of your bowel, and I don't think people are, like you and I are doing that because we're going to go do a free solo of El Cap, So we're not elite athletes, but if you want to maximize and kind of hope that you can create a bowel environment that's similar to people who are in super good health, then you're on a mostly vegetarian diet, considered being vegan. Stay away from animal products because industrial agriculture, they use antibiotics and it gets to us and it makes a difference. Stay away from alcohol and consider what your water source is. That's the bottom line. That's why I find this study interesting.
Okay. It seems like I'm trying to understand the interplay then between here's what we found and here's what's effective, and there isn't a magic bullet.
Right.
So how much faith can you have? Like, here's what you found, here's what's effective, sure, amongst this very specific population.
Right.
So
this is similar to the kind of efforts to look at blue zone people.
Right.
So you take somebody that's extremely healthy or has a health style that you want to emulate, and then you see what they did to get there, and then you draw overriding conclusions.
Sure.
So that's what this is.
But it seems like one of the overriding conclusions I come away with from all of this is that invariably those overriding conclusions are wrong.
Right.
And that we have to spend a whole bunch of time going, we didn't really know what we were talking about. And
I think what this study tells us is it's super intricate. There's multiple ways to get there. So even somebody maybe like me who's aging and has, some comorbidities and things can still hold that help. And these are the, hope that I can maximize my health for as long as possible. And here's the ways to do it. Well, I should consider doing that
among this very specific population again, because it's almost like instead of starting with here's how you get good gut health, maybe start with what's your gut health like?
We're going to talk about that in the next thing, I guess. So,
well, what else you got for this first one? Because it seems like we're done with this one.
Sorry.
I mean, it's, you know, what are the proportions? How do you take this very specific study and this outcome of this very specific study and then apply it in a context that's already been defined as being without context?
Right.
So how do you,
right.
What
yeah,
do you do
it's
with
definitely
this
largely anecdotal. Okay. So here's how they figured out what these guys, the components of their bowel, I guess, health was. And it's not specifically sampled, okay? They just pooped in a cup.
Sure.
So they sent in their specimens to something, it's a citizen scientist project, which I think is kind of exciting. Kind of like 23andMe for people interested specifically in gut health. And you send it into a project called the American Gut Project, okay? They are, you know, based in the United States, but they're studying people in situations internationally. I don't think these guys paid because they're also a little bit advertising for this organization. But they were able to break it down, and they do have, as part of their understanding, with a lot of years of data collection, so about 10 years, maybe closer to 15, of international and nationally oriented data collection, they do have some conclusions. And the conclusions that they have are very similar to what was summarized in this article. And we can talk more about that when we do the second
Okay.
part.
Okay.
But so there is a way that Joe Average Del Norte, if they have $99 to spend on such stuff, can send in, as a citizen scientist, they can send in a sample and get a personalized evaluation of what's going on in their gut.
Is there a way to do that without, I mean, just to go, you know, how you feeling? I mean, do we even have that kind of knowledge about this stuff? I mean, if you go, oh, hey, so what's going on? What's your ailment? You go into, I've got oh, well, check out your gut health. We don't even know that yet. I mean, just as far as like, oh, your immune system is compromised. Okay, well, what's the reason for your immune system being compromised?
Well,
there could be all kinds of reasons, one of which might be your gut health, which we only kind of partially are beginning to understand. Right.
Because it's so completely intricate. That's what I think. That's what I took away from this article in the magazine, was that, oh my God, it's way more intricate than we're going to understand in maybe the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Super intricate. And how do I take that as a healthcare provider and make it doable for a patient that I'm seeing in the clinic? And probably starting with patients who actually had known diagnoses like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or diabetes, apparently, because we never knew that microbiome was part of the picture.
Right.
So this is a paradigm, I think. And then what's going to come out of it, of course, is a bunch of little intricacies, and we're going to kind of sort that out later.
It seems like the challenge, though, is for people, for lay people. I think maybe for people even in the industry and in medicine, though, that is to remember that those little one-off little Gnostic bits of information that come out from all of this, that's not the reality. That's not the end. That's not the be-all, end-all of all of this, because you have to feed all that back into that incredibly complex system. Right.
You got to turn the page and then see what's next, and then kind of hook your knowledge together and try and. Here's the challenge as a healthcare provider: how do you make that usable and relevant to nice elderly lady sitting in the exam room that has diabetes?
Right. Can change. Well. And depending on how intricate and how in the weeds you want to get with all of this, would even just a change of diet really affect your gut health? I mean, because it seems like there could be so many other environmental and genetic factors involved with all of that, too.
I don't think it would hurt, because we keep coming down to the same 5 recommendations for health. Exercise, don't smoke, your diet should change in this way. Probably encouraging people to be vegetarian or vegan is important. And, do your healthcare maintenance. So I think this is all just a different way of looking at the same, 5
Right.
recommendations.
Yeah, another.
But what happens in science when you repeatedly get the same answer?
Well, then you start taking it for truth.
Right.
Yeah,
Then it
exactly.
becomes a theory, which means supported by truth, scientific truth.
So so if you have I'm curious about the vegetarianism and the veganism, because there's, depending, it's again, based on your own personal algorithm, you can go find the answer to whatever you want. But I've read a lot of things, not looking for them specifically, but a lot of things about totally vegetarian, totally vegan, not that great for you as a holistic human being, that you do need animal products for very specific functions, just nutritionally and metabolically and inside you, that it's hard to replicate. Certainly on the natural side, if we were all hunter-gatherers and whatever pipe dream that is, that you aren't going to have just a strictly vegetarian diet, and that maybe humans weren't meant to have just a strictly vegetarian diet.
Right.
All sorts of ways to take all of that. Do you have an opinion about all of that?
Yeah, I'm totally into meat. But what I've done kind of over the years is that I've become more particular about where the source of the animal products I'm eating is.
Right.
So locally sourced.
And organic and
it's,
not, yeah.
Yeah, it's like more expensive, but
Maybe it should be.
yeah, maybe
Right.
it should be. I don't begrudge the people doing this the money that they get. And I also eat a lot less of meat.
Yeah.
Because I'm raised in the 50s, right? So you had to have some
Every meal.
meat product and 2, limply cooked vegetables on the side, and then maybe you got dessert.
Boiled.
You got Jello, which is gelatin, which comes from hooves.
It's an animal product, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I've slowly gotten away from that, and not a super conscious decision, except for where I source my animal products, but kind of just naturally, what do you want to have for dinner? Quesadilla sounds good. I've got all these veggies all loaded up. So
I like that. I like that free form sort of menu.
Right.
What do we got? Let's build something. But
right. So I'm only cooking for myself too, which allows a great amount of freedom.
That's true,
I'm
yeah.
going to have ice cream tonight. Ooh, that's an animal product. Well, anyway,
But I'm just wondering because personally, and I don't know if this is just opinion. It's certainly opinion, but if that's all it is, I get the feel from what I've read, and because I try to watch what I eat and try to be healthy in every possible way, but that a little bit's okay. The fact that it is more expensive to eat right is actually good, because you shouldn't be eating that much. That the overabundance of corporately produced meat is actually a huge detriment environmentally and economically around the world for everybody.
Right.
And so to go without, I'm not interested in a vegetarian diet or a vegan, maybe a vegetarian diet, but a vegan diet, definitely not. That seems like you're cutting off half of your nutrition in that regard. Right. But I don't know if I'm just being a Cro-Magnon by thinking that way either.
Maybe I know when I was in college, it would always be HSU to me is that I was a vegetarian for about a year and I felt crappy. And it's because I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I didn't know about complementary proteins,
Right.
or I didn't pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm,
It was more of a cool factor than anything else. But I think if you can be educated and put knowledge in, and what that means is, and this was noted in this article, is these guys, they plan their diet out intricately.
Yeah, very
and it's not like, hey, we're done surfing, let's go to Burger King.
Right, or let's see what's in the fridge.
French fries sound good, So they don't do that.
Yeah.
They're super regimented in how they structure their diets, and they probably have nutritional coaches and stuff. Except for the guy who did the best, which was isolated guy living on the North Sea, has a garden. So
I'd like to know what comes out of a garden in Scotland on the North Sea, too.
yeah, I think what it looked like, they had a picture of him wandering through, and it looked like winter vegetables.
Okay,
Probably because it was the time of year, but they didn't show him in a hothouse with tomatoes. He's standing in the middle of a bunch of cabbage and kale and stuff like that. And is it really something about the dirt?
Right. Right. It could be that idiosyncratic.
They did have evidence that the Tough Mudder lady was influenced by her sport because she was essentially eating dirt at times. Not on purpose, though. So, what I'm saying is this is incredibly intricate. There's probably more than one way to get to good health. But, it opens the door for thinking about at least some major themes. And it's easy enough to, as Joe Average living in Del County, try a couple things, see how you feel. Check in, maybe ask your provider if there's access to nutritionalists. There is at UHS. I don't think there is at Del Norte Community. I don't know if anybody in the community all people live in Humboldt. So Zoom and phone encounters and stuff. Wow. But it's really, really hard to wake up in the morning and decide you're vegan.
Oh, yeah. No. And
people do it all the time, and they fail after about 4 days.
4 hours. You can get wildly off just making a decision like that. And then turn around 24 hours later, and you go, why do I feel this way?
Right. Yeah. And people in the exam room all the time, it's kind of virtue signaling, I think, where I'm going to be a vegan starting Monday.
It's like the old cartoon where you'd have like the old like the Looney Tunes wino who'd pull the bottle out with the XXX on it and do the muttered like swear and then drop it in the trash can. Right. Same with a hamburger. I'm a vegan now.
Yeah. So all these athletes put thought into what they're going to eat, and they do have resources more probably than the average Del Nortean. Some of us have springs on our land, but I don't know if they're as pure as what this guy was drinking.
Right. So, wow. Okay. Well,
anyway, I thought it was interesting.
I look forward to part 2 into exploring this further.
Yeah.
To see, because I got to figure out what's for lunch. All right, Lynn.
You got to put more thought into it.
Well, thank you, Lynn. We'll revisit this next time on The Next Health Matters.